Hey everyone, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today it is the 8th of December, 2022. And on today's show, a look at some comments made by Brett Yormark yesterday in Las Vegas about the Rose Bowl. Is he being a hypocrite with those comments? He also talks about Big 12 expansion and some comments from George Kliavkoff that we have to assess in relation to expansion as well. And maybe also some hits and misses from me on this Big 12 football season as well. Loaded show. It's all coming up.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LO Big 12. Please, if you guys have not subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel. We are trying to get to 3K subscribers by the end of December, by the new year 2022. We'd like to have 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. We're about 160 away from that. So if you guys want Big 12 content 5-6 days a week, we're your spot for it. We do game recaps, game previews, obviously previewing the college football playoff coming up with TCU, but all the bowl games, analysis, talk about conference expansion, about college football playoff expansion. We talk hoops as well, recruiting, the whole 9 yards. We got you covered here. Basically Sunday through Friday on Locked On Big 12. So make sure you guys give us a follow. I think actually we're 7 days a week this week. Did a recap on Saturday, CFP stuff on Sunday, and then we've had shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll have a show Friday as well. So we are always coming at you with Big 12 content here. Make sure you guys subscribe. Once again, follow us on Twitter at LO Big 12. You guys can find me at Josh Neighbors _. You guys can find Locked On Big 12 podcast-wise, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. So yesterday, meetings out in Las Vegas, and that meant that Brett Yormark got to talk. He made some comments about expansion. He made some comments about the Rose Bowl, and I think the Rose Bowl is where we are going to start with this. And so yesterday, he was talking with, once again, reporters in Las Vegas. There are meetings happening out there right now. And he said, quote, "I was put off candidly by the Rose Bowl," Yormark said via CBS Sports then Estad. "They were taking a different approach, playing for what was on the back of the jersey instead of the front," end quote. Now, what is he referencing? Well, during this process of college football playoff expansion, which has now basically just been agreed to, it's going to happen here, not next season, but the following season, is that one of the last dominoes to fall was, would the Rose Bowl be involved? And this really came down to, one thing in particular, like the Rose Bowl being stubborn. Were they going to be in the bowl rotation, right? Was that going to be for them? Because they really value playing on New Year's. They value their spot on ABC. They value the time they play on ABC, and just kind of the pageantry that comes along with that. And look, the college football playoff said, okay, we'd love to have the Rose Bowl. It is very, very much so the most recognized bowl game. Not any debate about that. Obviously, there's the national championship, but like all of this stuff came from bowls. If we're talking bowls, Orange, Sugar, Fiesta, there's one that rises above the rest, and that's the Rose Bowl. But we don't need the Rose Bowl title to expand the college football playoff. And if we do expand the college football playoff, well, you're not getting any of the top 12 teams who is playing in the Rose Bowl. You're going to lose a lot of that pageantry and, well, not pageantry. You're going to lose some of the marquee in the matchup, right? I mean, you're going to lose some of that high stakes. In this year's Rose Bowl, obviously, Penn State going to take on Utah. It's exciting. It's fantastic. It's a great Rose Bowl game, right? It's fun to have those kind of brands play in the Rose Bowl, but, that wouldn't be the case in the future. And so they fell in line. They eventually did. The CFP expansion committee basically said, the CFP committee, whatever they call it now, basically said, hey, you've got this date. And I think the date was last week at some point. Either fall in line or don't. And they eventually did. They fell in line. They joined the party. They said, we are coming in as well. And Brett Yormark even continued on a bit more, saying, quote, "The possibility of early entry to an expanded college football playoff is not something we're against." This is what the Rose Bowl committee chair, Laura Farber, said. "We continue to work with the CFP on the issue. We last spoke 2 weeks ago, but not have heard back from the CFP." All this kind of stuff. It's comments that they made, but it sounds like they are going to join in. Yormark also went on to say about this, quote, "I was the rookie in the room," about the first few CFP meetings. And then he said, I listened and learned, and I've been doing my first 120 days on the job. I think it's fair to say I was a little bit more vocal in most recent meetings. I'm just happy for the industry and for college football that we ultimately got where we did, and the Rose Bowl realized that nothing is bigger than the college football itself. We all land in a good place, and I'm excited with it. And I think, this comment obviously shows that he's starting to come out of his shell a little bit when it comes to the context of being around other commissioners, right? Being around the other power players. Obviously, he had to get his footing first. And obviously, I think the television deal, getting the job done with that, I mean, it's a pretty clear indicator of where he is comfortable. And I think the idea of also him starting to speak out more and more in these meetings shows you that, look, like, people respect him because he's gotten the deal done. He's starting to get a feel now. He's with big television partners, Fox and ESPN. He knows that he's valued by the TV folks, which obviously runs this entire shebang, and that he knows he's a valued part of what's going to be the college football playoff expansion when it goes to 12 schools. They're a valuable part of it right now, obviously, with TCU being in there right now, one of the 4 most deserving teams going to the CFP. So he understands that, and he started to come out of his shell just a bit, which is a very exciting, I think, idea for a lot of us who cover this league, who follow this league, who want this league to do well, right? I think where people might believe that there is some hypocrisy here is that, well, looking out for yourself, that's what this sport is built on. And I think it's a fair point, right? Brett Yormark's job is to look out for nobody else but the Big 12, right? And I think a part of that, where you could say that he is being hypocritical here, is that if they poached big Pac-12 schools and the Pac-12 were to go away, right, that wouldn't be good overall for the sport. And I think, I'm a proponent here of super conferences being bad for the sport. Like, I definitely believe that super conference is not the route I want to see this sport go in. And you could argue that Brett Yormark doing stuff like that and saying he wants another team on the outside coach, which would outside coast, excuse me, and that has an outside shot of killing other conferences, right? Or a chance of killing other conferences. It's not good for the sport, right? Maybe he's playing for the name on the back of the jersey. Sure, I could argue, you could argue that, but the Rose Bowl isn't them being out of the CFP. As I mentioned before, that hurts nobody but them, right? Like, the college football playoff is going to be watched whether the sun is setting in Pasadena, whether they're playing in Jerry's World in Dallas, whether they're playing, in the humidity and 75 degrees at night in Miami, whether they're playing in the Fiesta Bowl and what they call it, the red zone, the student section, the fan section for Arizona, the Arizona Cardinals, right? In that big stadium they have out there. Like, it does not matter where it is being played, folks, in Los Angeles as well now too, is in that rotation. People will watch, right? It is great right now that it is the Rose Bowl. But if the Rose Bowl is taking teams 12 and 15, that's cool. Or 14, 15, 16, whatever it is. That's cool. That's exciting. But you are hurting your brand because we know you're not delivering the best product possible out there. Now the Rose Bowl can say they are. Will they be on the same day as always? No. But will I still watch the Rose Bowl now because I know it's a part of the action? Yes. And look, some years, I think it's whatever the rotation is. Like, will they be out of the rotation or whatever it is? Yeah, sure. But now they're in the rotation. Now they are, now they are a part of this thing, as opposed to being on the outside looking in. And when you talk about like what Brett Yormark's doing, at least this has some benefit, trying to expand, that has some benefit for his conference. Is he looking out for himself? Yes. But is it cutting your nose off to spite your face? No. So, while he can accuse them of being team players and they weren't being team players, at least his actions are helping the team that he plays for, right? Or helping at least the individual body, the conference that he represents, the Big 12. And so I think that's the part of it where, yeah, you can call him a bit of a hypocrite. I mean, also everybody in this league, in this world, in this sport especially, is looking out for themselves, whether it's individual players, whether it's coaches, whether it is, whether it's the conferences, whatever it is, everybody to some extent is looking out for themselves, especially as the money increases in this game. Once again, whether it's coaching salaries, whether it's, transfer portal and NIL inducements, whether it is the amount of money you get from television partners, whether it is college football playoff expansion. You see, as I climb the ladder there, and I know some of it, the fans end up paying the price, right? tickets go up and costs for streaming services that we pay for and parking spots at games and, donations to universities to help build facilities. If you're invested like that, maybe your $50 that you give every year or your $200, whatever it is you give to your school. If you are somebody who donates, I do not donate to my alma mater. Maybe that donation does not go as far and you want to make sure you're valued and you give more money, whatever. I know we kind of feel it in some senses. But like, that's the way this thing is going. And I'd rather have Brett Yormark look out for the Big 12 than not do it. Right. And, the one thing I think the Big 12 cannot be tagged with is, and Bob Bowlesby gets a lot of credit for this, is that once it was announced that Texas and Oklahoma were leaving, obviously there were threats and lawyers and whatnot, but at the end of the day, the Big 12 kind of backed off, and as they should have, and focused on, okay, what can we do to make this league itself better? Well, they added 4 schools. They also were some of the, Bob Bowlesby, Craig Thompson, Mountain West, and then Greg Sankey, which I'm sure that was difficult for Bob Bowlesby to work with Greg Sankey. I mean, look, functionally, Greg Sankey put Bob Bowlesby out of a job, right? I mean, I think that while Bob Bowlesby gets credit for bringing in those new schools, like the changing of the guard in the Big 12 leadership really did start with OU and Texas leaving. And, I think that kind of gave us all pause. And so despite that, what Bob Bowlesby did was he got down to work on CFP expansion with Greg Sankey. Now, was it blocked? Yes. But in the end, it was really the 12-team plan that Craig Thompson and Bob Bowlesby and Greg Sankey, and I think it was also, what's his face at Notre Dame, was in on that as well. Totally forgetting the athletic director's name off the top of my head. Jack Swarbrick. Yeah, Jack Swarbrick. I think it was all of them like together doing this thing and making this thing happen. And it eventually, we ended up with, after the alliance garbage, right? We ended up with where we're at now. And I think even more so to can we fault Bob Bowlesby at all? Or excuse me, can we fault, Brett Yormark at all for looking out for number one is the alliance that we saw, and Kevin Warren turns heel, hits George Kliavkoff in the back of the head with a steel chair and, rolls him up 1, 2, 3 and is able to take USC and UCLA with him back to Big Ten country. Right. So there is a certain amount of, there are times where you need to play for your team. And there are times where you need to, play as a part of a larger group, right? And you play for the individual, I guess you could say, if we're calling these conferences the individuals. And sometimes you got to play for the whole group in terms of the sport, right? So I'm not trying to convince anybody here that the Big 12 expanding is good for college football. It's good for the Big 12. It's good for their long-term health. Sure, it's great. It's and all these videos do great rating talking about expansion and whatnot. But he's got to look out for the league because they were poached. And if you're not moving forwards, you're moving backwards. Somebody could be looking to make a move in your league. Somebody, could be looking to poach your teams. You never know. You've got to be proactive as opposed to reactive. And also, I think Brett Yormark has been obviously a big part of TV deals and also college ball playoff expansion now and trying to make the Rose Bowl come to the table. So I think all of this obviously has got to be taken in context. Somewhat hypocrite. Sure, a little bit, but that's part of the job. He's got to look out for the league, but it's also the expansion carrying the work on from Bob Bowlesby does help the long-term health of the league, does help the long-term health of the sport. Before, guys, it was tough to see a situation. I know Cincinnati made it, but they really had to do 2 years of work to make the CFP. With CFP expansion, now UTSA, kids at North Texas, kids at Tulane, kids at UCF, or, and whatever school I'm going to fill in for that, USF, all have a chance to play in the CFP if they win their league in a season. That was not the case before. I think that helps the sport just because more opportunity, more meaningful football, less bowls that don't matter, less bowl opt-outs. You get the story, you get the picture. It's good for the sport. So I think there's fair criticism being lodged in him for some of the comments, but he's doing his job, and I'm not going to get mad at him for doing his job. So I think there's points on both sides if you look at the context of it. He also made some comments, guys, about expansion. He mentioned before the need for that 4th time zone, right? He mentioned it once again. He wants to get to that 4th time zone. Now, it's interesting here because what is the fastest way to get there? What is the quickest way for the Big 12 to get into that 4th time zone? Well, it might not actually be Big 12 football. It might actually be football, right? It might actually be the Pac-12. It could be basketball. Obviously, we know there were, there was a second meeting when Gonzaga went down and played Texas, right? They had a conversation, and there were more talks about the Big 12 potentially going after Gonzaga. I think it's just a matter of time before Gonzaga goes somewhere else. I think for the health of their basketball program, it's very important they go elsewhere. Still a huge draw, right? Still on TV all the time, but they want more exposure. They want more difficult games during the season. They want to be tested more. Look at that non-conference schedule. It's brutal. It's brutal for a reason, but still, you can't get over the fact that you play Pepperdine and your toughest challenge is St. Mary's and sometimes San Francisco, USF. I guess UCSF, if you want to call it that, right? Or whatever it is, USF. You can't get over that those are your toughest challenges during the season, and going months without playing the Arkansas of the world, the Baylors of the world, the Texases of the world, the Dukes of the world, the Michigan States of the world. That is very hurtful for you when you show up again and you meet that kind of athlete, that kind of player when it comes to the NCAA tournament. I think their move is coming sooner than later. As it pertains to the Big 12, they're open for business. Once again, the one advantage the Big 12 has right now is that they know where their television things lie. They've got their deal done. They know where the money is going to be. They know that if they add Power 5 schools on the football side of things, they will get equivalent stake from at least ESPN. We'll see what happens with Fox. I was listening to Andrew Marchand and John Oran today on their sports media podcast. It came out on Tuesday, I believe, but still, they discussed the idea that, look, if the Hail Mary happens for the Pac-12 and the Board of Regents at the University of California school system blocks their move to the Big Ten, which is a possibility. I don't think it will happen, but it's a possibility we have to contend with. We have to, basically acknowledge. If that does happen, then there is a chance that the Big Ten can go after Washington and Oregon because they have a duty to the television partners to fulfill. And that duty at this point in time includes USC and UCLA. USC, for those of you who aren't familiar, private school, they can go wherever they want. They really aren't bound as long as the grant of rights is up. And obviously it is coming up. For UCLA, part of the UC school system, they are a bit more beholden to that UC Board of Regents. And I was born in California. I know people who are kind of not in this situation particularly, but have been around that. Those are some heavy hitters, folks. I mean, industry, politics, whatever, they're involved. I don't think they can block the move, but it's still on the table that they could do it. I don't think it's going to come. But if they do, it's a possibility we have to entertain when it comes, when it comes to the expansion aspect of what we're discussing. If that were the case, what would the Pac-12, what would the Big Ten do? Who would they target? How would they target them? And you say, well, how would you target them? What does that mean? Something that Oren and Marchand brought up is, would a school like an Oregon or a Washington, or maybe even both, we'll see, be willing to go to the Big Ten for less than what's being paid out to every single school? Because right now, it sounds like the appetite from most Big Ten schools, and think about it, if you're Indiana and Purdue, this makes sense. The appetite from most of the Big Ten schools right now is not to add more schools. Why? Because unless it's Notre Dame, you're not raising the value. Oregon and Washington have deemed to be, they're not going to pay basically the same share. If you add in Oregon and Washington, you actually be just distributing, a little bit more than the same amount of money you had before, more mouths to feed, basically less per school. But is there a situation where one of those schools, Oregon and Washington, says, all right, we'll take 70% of what everybody else is getting. We'll take 65%. And in exchange, for the duration of this television deal, obviously, which is up after 2030, whatever it is, 2030 is whenever it's up, right? We'll take less for the duration of this deal. And then once the new deal is up, once this deal is up, we'll then get a full share, or we'll gradually work our way to getting more money, whatever. That is a possibility. Once again, this is all contingent on the UC Board of Regents, or whatever the hell they're called, UC presidents, I forget what they're called, but them making the decision that, UCLA cannot go, and I'm sure it'll be a whole battle at that point if it does come down to that. So we'll actually end up seeing, but them staying could end up being worse, right? If UCLA and Oregon go. And once again, Brett Yormark says he's open for business. I know some of you out there have floated to me adding G5 schools and maybe even doing it at a lesser rate. No, that does not help. The Big 12 does not get helped from adding Tulane or UTSA or Navy or Army. They are not benefiting from that financially right now. The other schools like Kansas State and all them would not sign off on that. There's no reason to bring those schools in and take less money than what you got now to bring along those schools really for no apparent reason other than just to have more inventory, which wouldn't really get you that much more. So if you're going to target, it needs to be Utah. It needs to be Colorado, Arizona State. We know at least one of those schools has serious interest. And the other piece of this right now is George Kliavkoff. He made some comments as well, about where they are. And it's funny, we've been talking about so much, like, where is the Pac-12 timeline and where are they? And we've heard a lot of things about, we heard before or after Labor Day was going to be something, that we were going to see a deal get done. Oh, after Thanksgiving, before the new year. And now we've been pushed all the way back, it sounds like, into 2023. And Andrew Marchand mentioned this, and I think it's worth mentioning. That to me signals that there is appetite, I'm sure, for Pac-12 football, especially with Oregon and Washington. I still think they're very good brands. I think they're desirable, but the appetite fully is not there. Marchand and Oran mentioned Fox, ESPN, Amazon are interested, and then you fold the Pac-12 network stuff into an ESPN Plus, into Amazon Prime Video. I'll tell you what, guys, this just does make me happy that the Big 12 is on linear cable, because that is still what we judge a lot of success on. Will it be for much longer? I don't know. But that is still where a lot of success is judged right now, is in the linear cable space. And the Big 12 is there. They did very well, obviously, with the Big 12 championship game. That has to be mentioned, about when we talk about this. And so the Pac-12 is there, and they have to get the grant of rights. They have to get the TV. Then they have to look at expansion. I mean, they're in a difficult spot right now. And look, I do think that George Kliavkoff has a chance to get them a television deal. I think because it's less teams, it probably ends up in the neighborhood of what the Big 12 is getting. But you like the Big 12's chances because, when Baylor plays TCU, when TCU plays Oklahoma State, when Cincinnati takes on BYU, we're talking about Fox. We are not talking about Amazon Prime Video, right? And that is a benefit. The one value that these standalone Thursday night games have for the NFL and for Amazon is that they're largely uncontested. Sure, there is, Thursday night football on ESPN and whatnot, but those games largely have not been super high quality games. They used to be, they're not anymore. It's uncontested on a weeknight. People are watching the Thursday night games because of that. When it is contested, when it is Saturday at 3 or 7 or 8, maybe 10, you get the advantage, but still, I think, do people want to go all the way to Prime Video at 10 p.m. to find the game, right? There is a benefit to being on linear cable. And that's the one advantage the Big 12 has of the Pac-12 right now. I still think the Pac-12 stays together as it sits right now. I still think they get the job done, but, I don't think, the longer it goes, obviously, the more you realize that a lot of people are satisfied out there. The television partners are satisfied. Fox has a share of the Big 12 and they're getting plenty of Big 12 basketball too. And they have a share of, predominantly a lot of the Big 10. ESPN has ACC, SEC, Big 12, and a lot of the Big 12, both hoops and football. Amazon's got nothing, but they're not on cable. CBS is getting the Big 10. Maybe they want to add some more stuff in there as well. I think there's more inventory space for them to grow, right? As ESPN and Disney take over that full SEC package. So you're starting to see, a lot of these people are relatively full. And if you're not offering an A package, if you're offering an A1 or A1 and A2, whatever it is, what is the appetite? What is the dollar figure going to be? How long is the deal going to be? And it makes you think that while there are some strong brands out there, Cal, Stanford, who are really, really down, Washington and Oregon, and they had really nice seasons. Oregon a chance to get to 10 wins when their bowl game, and obviously Washington at 10 wins this year. Yes, they are strong brands that are good in quality, but the fact that nobody's jumping on board and trying to get there and trying to make this thing happen, it's the advantage to the Big 12, and they can spin stuff all they want. George Kliavkoff said, Deion Sanders adds value. I think that is correct. I think that is definitely correct. But acting like Deion Sanders going to the Pac-12 was a reason that you waited to do a television deal is absolutely untrue. I cannot fathom that. Because, you'd say, look, Deion's coming. He's coming. We know it's a done deal. We know he's going to Colorado. You can say it behind closed doors. Like, you don't have to worry about that. It's going to happen. That's something that you can guarantee. Like, if I'm a, Fox, whatever, but how many more millions of dollars am I going to give you because Deion Sanders is at Colorado? Right. And this feels like a boomer bust type deal anyway. Like, is it worth that much more? I could be wrong here. I could be off. I'm excited to see what happens to Colorado next year. It's really intriguing, but like, if they end up being a 5-6 football team, right, or a 4-2 football team, why, it's interesting he's there, but then they just become like every other kind of mediocre to above average team that's in these leagues, right? Like, what is, is 4-2 Colorado like super, super exciting? Because look, they could do it. They could run the gauntlet. They could make it happen. But like, look at Colorado's history. They had that one-up year a few years ago, but it's been pretty mediocre and below average and really even at times outright bad since then. So is that like a huge ratings boon for you? You're bringing in Deion Sanders to the point where it's like, we're getting extra money. I think it's helpful. Don't worry. Like, don't get me wrong here. I do think it's helpful, but the idea, it's like, we have to hold off on a TV deal because Deion Sanders is going to coach Colorado, to me is just like, it's just, if you put it in context of the fact that they've been talking for a long time about when these deals are going to get done, and the fact that it was going to happen, it's going to happen, just the way it's going to happen. Like, I remember John Canzano said after Labor Day, after Thanksgiving, before the New Year. Now it's after the New Year. We were just waiting on Deion feels relatively hollow, is what I'd say. Not saying it's totally, I shouldn't have said totally untrue. That was wrong of me to say. But the idea that it's like this bona fide, absolute slam dunk ratings plus for a few games, sure. If they do really well, sure. It's got the potential there. But I don't think it's like this, it's not a home run, like off the bat. It's not like you're adding something that is guaranteed ratings, pillar to post, all football season long for Colorado. They have to perform well. They have to turn that roster over. He's got to get good coordinators. Looks like he might be getting good coordinators, but he's got to do all that stuff to make it happen. Then we'll see about the ratings. Once again, I think Colorado's ratings will be decent, especially to start off with, but if they get good, then we'll see what happens. Those are kind of the comments that he made. Like, once again, they add value. We have to wait till the end of December, right? Saying Deion's a proven winning coach. Like, we will see. And George Kliavkoff said he is bullish on the media rights a week ago. He feels he doesn't have any sense of urgency. I guess the one thing is too, is that, they're not competing with anybody right now. So there is no sense of urgency. And maybe a new player could come around and say, oh, we were very interested in the Pac-12, but you are running relatively out of time, because if USC and UCLA are leaving in 2024 and you need a TV deal done, you only have so much time for a new TV partner to come around, right? You only have so much time for that to happen. So obviously tracking that pretty closely and then asking, okay, what does that mean for the Big 12? We've talked about them ad nauseum, adding more schools, Arizona State, Utah, Colorado, at what cost? Once again, like, I'm not going to go back to the Colorado thing. That'd be great to have Deion and Colorado in the conference. For sure would add ratings. I'm not sure how long Deion Sanders also is going to be at a school like a Colorado too, right? Like, if he wins 10 games or 11 games one year and an SEC job opens, and that's where he's from, or a job in the ACC, that part of the country opens, that's where he's from. Miami, right? Miami should hire Deion Sanders, right? That'd be hilarious. They did. I'm just saying, like, I think banking on Deion Sanders' television ratings thing is huge. And the thing is, for Colorado or for the Pac-12, like, that's more they're banking on. The Big 12 adding Colorado is more for like inventory expansion and like being solidifying spot purposes, as opposed to a slam dunk money thing. No Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders or not when it comes to the Big 12's interest in them. All right, so that will do it. We'll do hits and misses either tomorrow or next week. Hoping to talk some Oklahoma State tomorrow as well. So that'll be coming up. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LO Big 12. You guys can find me at Josh Neighbors _. And as always, till next time, my friends, stay safe.